Good evening, Destiny International Ministries and friends. As you can see, I am not Apostle Brown. My name is Patrice Horton, and I am one of the elders at Destiny International Ministries, as well as a licensed clinical mental health counselor. And for the month of May, Apostle Brown is allowing our ministry to highlight Mental Health Awareness Month. So in lieu of our weekly enrichment studies, we will be engaging in conversations with a counselor, and we will be addressing various mental health topics. So tonight we're going to be discussing Black men and mental health. And I will be joined by some local therapists as well as a pastor as we talk about this important subject. Before we get started, I would like to say that our conversation tonight isn't a substitute for a therapeutic relationship with a professional counselor. If you feel the need to talk with a counselor or seek mental health, seek out services from a mental health professional, you can feel free to contact us and we can provide you some counseling resources. Also, if you have a specific question during our discussion, leave a comment on Facebook in our live chat, as well as on our YouTube chat, and we'll make sure that we try to get that answer for you on tonight. So without further ado, I would like to go ahead and have our guests join us on today, and they're going to be introducing themselves, and then we're going to dive right into the conversation. So we're going to dive right into the conversation on tonight. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll get started with Dr. Eric Williams. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I want to make sure everybody can hear me well. Give me a thumbs up if you can't hear me. Okay. So I'm Dr. Eric Williams. I am a counselor in the Raleigh, Fayetteville area of North Carolina. Also teach at University, Walden University, and I am also a supervisor for clinicians here on the Fort Bragg as well as Cherry Point areas. And so this is a great opportunity to be able to talk tonight. This is something that I have done some research on, presented on in conferences. And several colleagues and I have also just published a book called Black Fathering in Mental Health by Dr. Michael Hannon. So he's the editor for the book. There's a compilation just of Black men, actually Black counselors talking about what it means to be a Black man and to be a Black father. So you may want to check that out. It's also on Amazon. Again, it's called Black Fathering and Mental Health by Dr. Michael Hannon.
Thank you so much, Eric. We will definitely check that out. Okay, Pastor Jamal, can you go next?
Sure. Greetings to everyone. Thank you, Elder Horton. My name is Jamal Brody. I'm a bivocational pastor. I pastor the Ambassadors for Christ Ministries in Lewisburg, North Carolina. I've been there for 5 years. Currently, I work in state government. This year will be 19 years. And I love and enjoy what I do in government, but I love and enjoy pastoring as well in a rural area called Lewisburg, North Carolina. So thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you. All right, last but not least, Mr. Kendrick Burden.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. Kendrick Burden, like Mr. Brody, I work at county government office full time, but I also have my own private practice as well. And so I see clients all throughout the state of North Carolina. Because of the pandemic, now my reach is a lot longer than it was just in the Greenville, North Carolina area. And so the biggest thing is I'm a licensed clinical social worker and also a licensed clinical addiction specialist. So can do substance use and anything related to mental health as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I do want to say thank each and every one of you for agreeing to be a part of the conversation on tonight. I will say that the issue of Black men and mental health is definitely something that I have become more, sensitive to and more aware of as I have worked with Black men in my private practice. I have a part-time private practice as well. And I think the sensitivity to this topic or this area has definitely heightened since I began to work with African-American male in my private practice, especially as it relates to things like depression, anxiety, trauma and some other things. So I am looking forward to the conversation on tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So we know that mental health concerns has been on the forefront of a lot of our minds recently, right? Individually, collectively, globally, in light of this recent pandemic. And when we look at the pandemic, social climate, just times of uncertainty, I think this is something that is weighing on a lot of people's minds lately, even how this pandemic is impacting children as well. But as I mentioned tonight, we're going to be focusing on Black men and mental health. And so my first question to each of you will be, what have you noticed as it relates to Black men or men of color that you serve either in your practice or either your congregants as it relates to mental health over the past 2.5 to 3 years or just in general? And Dr. Williams, I'm going to let you go ahead and start us off with that question.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think a lot of times men, especially Black men, get a bad rap for being aggressive. And I'll share a quick story and then I'll kind of answer that question. But when I was in Korea, I was in the military. I remember talking to a Korean national and just kind of understanding the culture. I was just stationed over there. This was many years ago. And I remember talking to a Korean national and I just asked her what the impression of Black men. And it was interesting because I was told at that time that they were told that the Korean national, it was a female I was talking to, was told that by her family, that the parents are saying that they should marry a white man because white men, and make sure he's an officer because they have money and they'll treat you well. And I said, well, what are the images you have or what are the beliefs you have about Black men? She said they don't necessarily associate, like they wouldn't encourage that because just of the violence that they had seen in TV. So a lot of the images that have been painted about us, and it was interesting because I'm in America and I kind of know what it is. When you go to another country and you hear it from somebody else who's not even American, it hits a little bit differently. So I do think a lot of times one of the biggest things about Black men is we are often misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm pretty sure the other people on the panel are going to dive into this a little bit more, but being misunderstood, sometimes the symptoms of a depression or an anxiety or trauma manifest into some other behavioral, some behaviors that may not necessarily sell that story. And so we get labeled a certain way, but not really understanding the underlying symptom, the underlying cause of what's happening. So I think that's one of the things that I see is a lot of times we're just misunderstood. The messages that we give off versus the messages that are actually happening within us are not always the same.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Burden, can you chime in on that question?
Yes, ma'am. Like Dr. Williams was kind of talking about when it comes to, how sometimes cultures can kind of look at you, even our own culture, you have to be tough. You're not tough, then you're weak. And so having to walk around being tough all the time, that can put you in, when you think about trauma, almost like in fight, flight, freeze mode, meaning that I got to be tough all the time. I got to be looking around. I got to find an opportunity to be tough. I got to show myself. I got to prove myself. And as boys, as a little boy, all the way up into a man, you're always put in situations to prove yourself. You want to play on a team. You got to prove yourself to see if you want to play on this team. When you think about going into military and things of that nature, that's a proven process. When you start dating girls and women, that's another proven process. And so as you're always kind of proving yourself, it's an opportunity to say that, is there a time where I don't have to prove myself? Is there a time where I'm able to be? It's a guy that I kind of started reading called Jason Wilson, and he's a therapist as well. And he kind of talks about being a comprehensive man versus a man of masculinity and all the time. And a comprehensive man is saying I have courage, but also can be, I can also be courageous at the same time, but also be compassionate. I can be sensitive, but I also can be strong as well. And so having a combination of the both of them is a comprehensive man, because I don't always have to tap into lion. I don't always have to be lion man. I can sometimes be, a lamb. and have those different components. So just being able to be a comprehensive man is something that he preaches and something that I kind of started diving into. But it's just that whole process of, it's better than what it used to be, meaning that because of, the mental health, there was a harsh stigma behind it in our culture. And I won't go too deep into it, but I'll leave some reels for somebody else to eat on. But I just wanted to kind of talk about, stigma is reduced a little bit, even though the stigma is still there.
Yeah. I love it because both of you guys have already started to talk about some things or some questions that I definitely want us to dive a little bit deeper into a little bit later. So Pastor Jamal, please go ahead and weigh in and let us know your input. What are you noticing among your congregation, members of your church, within yourself? Just go ahead and please share.
They both have said some great things, I think real things as well. I would say this, I like this, saying about being misunderstood. I really think that we as men, we're misunderstood. One of the things I could say, I would notice about the body of Christ, as far as men, the men have kind of shied away. Like, everybody's personality is different. You have an extrovert, you have an introvert personality. I have an extrovert personality, right? And so the way that I may express myself, but I've noticed the men of God and the men period have just kind of went more into an introvert personality trait. And because they don't really know how they feel, they are stressed from being in the house, don't understand what's really going on. And it's kind of like they're like a glass, and you don't know when that glass is going to fall and break. But if it falls and breaks, it's like, well, I can't allow my wife or my kids to see that happen to me, because when something breaks, it shatters, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you put that back together? And so what I've noticed is that the men have just kind of, they're going more of an introvert mode, and they really don't say much because they don't want to say the wrong thing, but their mind is constantly going and they don't want to be prejudged. Unfortunately, in our culture, we are very quick to prejudge. And I think that that's something that we need to stop, prejudging. Like Mr. Burden said, it's okay for men to be sensitive. It's okay for men to, be compassionate and stuff. And sometimes I think the sisters, they say they want a strong man, and not to say that a strong man cannot be sensitive. A strong man cannot be compassionate, and what they think they need, that's not what they need. And so we try to, Dr. Williams, prove ourselves, about how we, just to have that masculinity, so those are some of the things that I've noticed. And, and sometimes just maybe we're a little bit too quiet, because we're trying to process, how am I going to mentally handle the things that's going on in our homes? Yeah. Did you want to say something, Dr. Williams, or? I saw you shaking your head. Okay.
No, I mean, he's preaching. So I was just like, yeah, I'm taking it all in.
I'm just sharing.
I was just taking it all in. Like he was on point. So actually both of them. So it was saying a lot of things that I could really resonate with. I think this topic is very it's very much a loaded topic that could probably be a part 2 and a part 3. Not trying to tell you how to do this, but I think it's gonna be I think it's a lot that can come from this. I think we've got some real good good experts on here on this panel too. So I'm just taking it all in, Jamal. Keep it up, man.
I love it because you guys already hit on something I do want to address in terms of this kind of unhealthy masculinity that sometimes that exists within our culture. But one of the things that, when you were talking, it made me think about a young gentleman who I'm seeing now, and we were in the middle of our session, and he's talking about, I just want to go somewhere and cry. I just feel like I need to just go somewhere and cry. I feel like I can't do it right now. I'm trying to hold it down for my family, trying to hold it down for my wife. I'm trying to work. I'm trying to do all these things, be all these things. I really don't feel like I have time to grieve, like I have time to process some of this past painful memories and things that have happened to me. And in his mind, initially, it was like, once I do all these things, then I feel like I'll be able to maybe to breathe or to be able to process it. But it was also this fear of like, if I start this process, like what is going to happen? Like, will I fall apart? What's going to happen? And I think it was trying to like keep things together. And in order to keep things together, I just got to keep plugging away, just keep doing what I'm doing, but not taking that time to say, you know what, my mental health matters too. And I need to take some time out for myself to really process and to do this thing so I can be fully present, right? In other areas of my life. So I want to just open it up to that. Like, have you guys experienced it? I mean, that hit me when he said, I just want to go somewhere and cry. So in terms of feeling like I don't even have space or place or the time to even allow myself to even deal with all of this stuff that I'm going through or have been through. Can anyone like just chime in and speak to that? Because that just really hit me when he said, like, I just want to go somewhere and cry. I just need to, to have that release, but I don't even know if I can do that.
I guess with me, a personal example, and just you try to, when you do therapy, you kind of, how much information you want to share about yourself to the client. So you kind of balance that thing because you don't want to be in there telling everything in the whole hour, 45 minutes, however you done took all the time. And so I guess a personal thing is I didn't always do therapy. I worked in, the foster care and adoption system. So seeing children that come through a system that's been abused, neglected, or some level of dependency, you see a lot of brokenness in that whole process. With me, every young man that came through, that's what I usually had. They was tough, but it was one of the things where, you had to work through it. It was a cultural thing, as in, because you're Black, I guess you can relate to every Black male that comes through here, but that's not always true. But at the same time, that was a concept from the different supervisors. But when I transitioned out of that, I was thinking about, I was tired of doing that. Not so much burnout, but I just wanted to do something different. And so I decided I wanted to do therapy. Prior to therapy, I didn't feel nothing. And I won't gonna feel anything. That part of me was dead, and I intentionally killed it for the simple fact that I was like, I'm okay. I can live my life a certain way and be okay, and not have other aspects of me grow. And when I got older, I was like, that's stupid. Why allow yourself to lose? If God is putting everything on the table, but you're gonna say, well, let me get this, let me get this, and let me get that. Why not get everything if it's all mine? And so it was just one of the things where, I told myself, in order for me to do therapy, then you got to allow yourself to feel. Because one of the things, I'm authentic, and I'm not going to tell someone else to feel their feelings and not me do it at the same time. And so it was one of those things where when I was 15, two of my brothers died in a car accident. And one was 16 and one was 14. And then eight other students that was all in the same car all died together. So best friend, girlfriend, and all classmates all gone at one time. We didn't do no therapy. You go to church. And at the same time, when I got older, I couldn't even really blame my grandparents for the simple fact that they was grieving at the same time too. And so when you got everybody in the house grieving, it's almost like every man for themselves. And so that's a harsh reality for a child that's 15, but it is what it is. And so at that point, from 15 all the way to 35, I was stuck there emotionally. So didn't feel anything. Didn't cry, would never cry or anything like that. And so when you kind of talk about it, Patrice, about you want to feel something, or in that particular example you use, when you want to cry, but you want to allow yourself to cry, I can't allow myself to go this far, because if I go that far, then I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know how people are going to perceive me. I don't know if I can overcome what I think is behind me. And so kind of going through all of that, I started learning stuff through therapy and doing their own therapy on myself. And that was how I was able to overcome, to say, I'm good now. I can actually tell someone. I don't have to always understand exactly, I don't have to be the one that go through everything that you've been through, but I still have similar feelings. Hurt is hurt. Pain is pain. shame is shame. It may be look like this and it may look like that, but it's still the same. And so one of the things is that, making myself deal with the past and not running from my fears, because as long as I run, they're gonna chase me down. You can't run that fast. And so if it get me at 25 or if it get me at 40, it's gonna catch me. And so, but all the damage, all the time that I wasted in that process was a lot. And so just allowing yourself to kind of realize that, it's okay to feel those things, because at the end of the day, when I did that at 35, being 41, I'm still here. I overcame it. And now I'm helping so many other people to overcome theirs, but it wouldn't have been able to be prosperous if I didn't deal with my own stuff first.
That's good. I love that. I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bird. And thank you, Kendrick. Yeah, doing some of that work. I love it. Did anyone else want to make any comments on that? Because I think I'm going to shift to a different topic, not a different topic, but in that same vein. Anyone else want to say anything before I shift a little bit?
No, I just add real quick. It was great just to hear that, because I think it underscores just how the pressures of life that men experience. And these pressures, a lot of times we've just been so socially, influenced to believe that you have to be a certain way. And, I listened to Kendrick share his story. And, again, like he said, we don't have to have the same story, but, the story, the pain, the shame, when you sit across from another man in counseling, because you know your story and you're okay with your story, you process your story, you're in a good place with your story, you can almost use your story as a hypothesis to test his story to kind of see, are you also dealing with some trauma? Are you dealing with some loss? Are you dealing with, and so it kind of gives you a place to work from. And I do think that when people have that capacity to be compassionate and empathetic, we don't necessarily judge, like he was saying. It gives you a space to kind of approach it from a compassionate place. And a lot of times in therapy, we also, at least, kind of when I think about this, we have to set that stage, because we know as a Black man that another Black man, a Black guy telling another guy or anybody else what his feelings are, it's a good chance that he has been shut down at some point. So to buy into the idea of coming to counseling, to trust us, I always tell my students, you got to earn the right to be a therapist with that person. That first session is almost an audition for the next session to come in. Can you be a person? Can you be authentic? Can you be genuine and just hear that story out? You don't have that person. He came in the first time, but trust me, he don't trust you. He's not trusting you. So I think, hearing that story, I'm just happy to hear you share that, Kendrick, because I think a lot of guys have these very similar stories. And a lot of times, as Jamal was saying before, it gets misunderstood. You don't see that story. You see the other stuff. Oh, he's on the streets. He's doing that, whatever. But we don't know the story. We don't know what happened. So that's all I was going to add. Sorry.
Yeah, no, great. So, when I think about that, it makes me also wonder, we can just go straight into this, because we've already kind of started dancing around this conversation in terms of, like, well, what are some of the barriers, right? What are some of the barriers that may prevent Black men from seeking out or participating in counseling services or mental health services? Like, what would be some of those things? I know we've talked about this kind of unhealthy masculinity and things of that particular nature, but I want to put it out there in terms of what are some other things or misconceptions or other things that prevent Black men from maybe wanting to go there to engage in therapeutic service. So Jamal, I'll let you start off with that one.
Yeah, I hope, before, because I know you really have the experts. I would say one of the biggest barrier is pride. Black men, African-American men, are very prideful. I get therapy now. I've been doing therapy for some time, since my mom passed away in 2019. So I've been doing therapy since I lost my mom. I've done it before that time, but I think one of the biggest issues is pride. We've been taught that if you go to see a psychologist, if you go see a therapist, there's something wrong with you mentally, you're crazy, and you don't want to be known as someone crazy. And don't go to school and tell nobody that you're going, you're going to see. But the thing is, I mean, that's what our parents have told us, what we have heard. And so that has been embedded in our mind. So now we have that shell up, like he said, your first session, you don't trust it. Like, it's like, well, no, I don't need this. That's how it was my first session. But then because my pride would not allow me to detox. My pride would not allow me to be vulnerable. But I really think one of the barriers is that we are so prideful, and a lot of us have insurance, we have resources, but we just don't want to know. No, people think this. I'm gonna say on the churchy side, I don't want this one to know, because they're gonna know all my business, or I don't want to contact my resources because then my manager will know what's going on. What they fail to realize, there's a level of confidentiality that your employer has to hold, and the list goes on. And so we really should break that stigma, I mean, and to say, hey, I tell women, it's okay to see a therapist. It is okay. I am an advocate for it. I will continue to go see a therapist, and get out of your pride, because it will help you to be more healthier, and to make your life so much better. And I say it'll set you free. That's what I really believe. I mean, of course, I'm a faith-based. I believe God. I know God, that He has power, but it sets you free on how you look at the outlook of life. But definitely, I would say pride.
All right, cool. Pride. You said a little bit about stigma too. All right, Mr. Burden or Mr. Williams.
I'll add to it, try to be brief with it too. I think, so just to piggyback on what Jamal was sharing about the pride, I think that is a huge thing. And I think the other thing, that I've seen too is a lot of us, because of where we come from, I don't want to give out the impression that I'm saying all Black people come from low socioeconomic statuses. That's not the truth of it. But I do know a lot of us come from places where we don't necessarily see what success looks like. And so we create a definition of success. And I can almost guarantee you ask about 10 people on the street right now, 10 Black guys, actually any people, what it takes to be success, very few are going to say, my mental health. They usually talk about, I got to go to college, I got to go, have a certain amount of money, I got to have, whatever it takes. It's everything else besides the mental health. So you look at, Black men, a lot of times you ask these young kids, adolescents, people in their 20s, what does it take to be successful? Their definition rarely consists of mental health. Like, I got to go see a therapist, I got to make sure I process my other stuff out. It is usually the other things. And so the roadmap to success that has been created for a lot of them, that either self-created or that's been passed down to them by other people before them, rarely includes the idea of you should go see a counselor. A lot of us believe that, hey, that person on Instagram who got that really nice house and that nice whip, they just got it, and they just, work really hard and got it. But what they don't realize a lot of times is that's fake. And then the other piece is you have to work on yourself. You have a lot of the work, when people talk about self-care, self-awareness, we like to not believe in that. We have that mentality. A lot of us have that mentality that we gotta hustle, we gotta grind, I'll sleep later type mentality. And a lot of us don't take the time to focus on us. And so if it comes down to, and I've said this in the past, even as a therapist, when I was first starting out, I'm starting a private practice. I need to see some clients so I can have some income coming in. But wait, for me to go see somebody, that means I'm gonna lose money. And so if I gotta lose money on my job to go see somebody and I'm just gonna talk to them, I can talk to people at my job. And I think sometimes that becomes a mentality that I don't wanna go pay somebody to talk to when I can just talk to this person over here. I need to make this money come in because I gotta take care of my family. The idea of mental health is not so as a top priority. And so the idea of success is really, really affected too. So I think that kind of is the other piece, that pride, this idea of what it means to be successful. It's just a big barrier that a lot of us can run into. That's part of my story. So I'm kind of speaking from personal experience as well as other experience I've heard.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Burden, you want to weigh in on that question as well?
Just a little bit, especially in the Black African-American culture, we sometimes denial in mental health, we don't always think that mental health issues exist. We'll say that go to the church and God can fix everything and it be done, which is true. But I'll leave that alone for right now. But I guess the thing is denying doesn't mean that it goes away. And when it doesn't go away, when you know that something is going on, because typically as men, you know yourself, you know your personality. And you get up in the morning, if you're a morning person and you really energized, and now you start waking up and now you realize that I hate mornings and it seems like it's a huge burden just to take a shower, then that's not normal. And so one of the things is that kind of being able to stop denying the mental health, that there are mental health issues. And then also that in our culture, I know with myself kind of growing up, the importance of family privacy. You know, I've heard it so many times from a government agent, don't go down there and tell that white man all your business. And I'm like, look, look at me. Do I look white? But at the same time, they put me in that same category. And one of the things is that, you know, I knew growing up from my grandparents' home, whatever stayed in it, whatever goes on in this house, it stays in this house. And if I told anything, I knew I was gonna get striked up once it got back to them. And so still having that same philosophy that, you know, there's so many different things in the sense of when you need help, you need to get help. If you don't know you need help, then at least go see if someone can properly assess you and say, no, bro, you're good. Or no, I think there's a little bit more going on. Let's process this and talk about it. So it's just one of those things. And then I guess the last piece is just, you know, the access of healthcare. You know, sometimes it's tough trying to find a therapist. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, if you're already, it's sort of like addiction. When a person say they're ready to get clean, you better get them right then, because if you let them think about it a little bit too long, they'll change their mind and then they're gone. And so when anybody, but especially, you know, the men, when they say that they really need some help and they're willing to get it, but when you start to try to find that help and you have to jump through this hoop and then this hoop, then after a while you just say, forget it. I'm not worried about it. And so just that ability to try to access can sometimes be a barrier because it just stops you right in your tracks before you even start.
Yeah, definitely. You guys all said some really good stuff. And I did want to comment right quick to something Mr. Burden said in terms of different types of information or messages that are conveyed or communicated even within the church community in terms of, you know, just Jesus can fix it, right? But the thing about it is God, you know, has people. God can use therapists. God can just like he uses doctors. And I think when we talk about this whole disparity between how we look at our physical health versus our mental health. So, you know, you wouldn't be in church and someone say, well, don't go see that doctor if you have this ailment, right? Or don't go see the doctor if this is going on. But sometimes they don't give that same, they don't send those same messages in terms of, hey, if you're struggling emotionally, right? If you're dealing with depression or anxiety, hey, go see, you know, someone who is trained to help you, to help address those type of issues. And so you see the disparities even in how we look at physical health issues versus mental health issues. And then the stigma and the shame and the labeling sometimes that can go on even within our community, and then within the church faith-based community as well, our churches as well. So that's something that I want to say, that God can use anybody, right? You know, there's examples in the Bible where he used the donkey. So, but God can use anybody to help facilitate, I think, what my brother-in-law said in terms of that freedom, that deliverance, right? So healing can come in more than one way. You know, it's not just have to come with someone laying hands on you or in prayer. Healing can come by you coming and walking out a process, whether that is the process of seeing a counselor or whether that is a process of going to see a doctor and getting treatment that way. So just being aware that healing can come in a variety of ways, and let's not limit, right, the ways in which our healing can take place and come. So I appreciate you bringing that out, because sometimes things can get said in the ministry or in churches that prevent people, that can be a barrier, right? That could be a barrier. They're hearing comments or negative comments across the pulpit about therapy, about going and seeing counseling. That can be a barrier. Because they maybe they're thinking about it, but the other pastor done said, you don't need to go see no therapist, right? So that's something that we need to be mindful of. So you guys shared a lot of good information. We talked about one of the things that you guys mentioned, and I wanted to go there right quick, is sometimes these misconceptions, right? So let's talk a little bit about maybe how depression may look in men versus females, right? That gender differences and how depression may look or present itself that sometimes lead to misdiagnosis in African-American boys and men. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So what is depression? How might depression look different in a male versus a female? Like what may be some of the symptoms that men may exhibit that may not be the traditional, DSM-5, TR, like types of things, right? So Dr. Williams, how might that look different in males versus females?
Yeah. So I think one of the things we have to think about when thinking about just depression alone and how it looks in men is I want to kind of use Kendrick's story from before, because I think it really exemplifies a lot of what men do is we learn how to compartmentalize and we shut off emotions. As he said, kill off, that part of you. And a lot of us will do that. And so what ends up happening as a result of that is I might seem like I'm fine. I am perfectly okay. I'm good, and I can sit out here and, I like to go to the club, or I like to smoke a little bit. I like to do, I might like to drink, or, I like to spend money on, whatever. So it begins to manifest in other ways, and it gets rationalized into these are just things that I like to do. These things make me feel good, and they can make you feel good. I play video games a lot or whatever it is. So, but what happens is a lot of times you have to begin to look at these as coping mechanisms, because a lot of times they come in not because they just say, hey, today's the day I'm gonna go to counseling. Unfortunately, most guys who come in, at least in my experience, it's because their significant other or a family member or a job or the legal system has basically said you need to go, which means that behavior that was being exemplified was the issue that got them there. And you kind of hear too, depending on the research or some of the documentaries talk about this too. Most males may not get a diagnosis until they're in the penal system. And that's when that's the first time they've actually been evaluated. Oh man, this person's been dealing with trauma or depression or whatever the case may be. So you begin to see that the behavior itself is what really gets them there. So the guy who's playing video games all the time, just because he's having a hard time, coping with life or whatever the case may be, or he's, just like to go out and hang out with the fellas all the time, although he has a wife and some kids, what you realize is that on the surface, it looks pretty innocent. Nobody really picks up on it. But deep down inside, this guy's coping with the idea that I don't feel like I'm doing well. I'm going to go out and do some other things that make me feel good. Now, anybody listening to this, I'm not saying just because your man go out and is playing video games or hanging out with fellas that he's depressed. But those are some of the things that you begin to see. So it looks pretty innocent on the outside. This guy will go out, have a good time, and it's very easy for guys to hide it because they compartmentalize quite a bit. They've learned the art. A lot of us have learned the art of compartmentalizing and hiding it because we grew up in settings where it was not okay to show that. So you learn how to do the other stuff. And so we look at people like some of these athletes. I mean, I'm not saying every athlete you see who's buying a whole lot of stuff is depressed or anxious. However, you can begin to look at these and say, okay, I wonder what's happening for this person because they're just kind of blowing through a lot of this. And then a lot of them, you hear the story after the fact, like, yeah, I was young and, I was just dealing with this. So I think it's just something to know that when guys, it is going to be very difficult to just pinpoint it and say, this guy's dealing with this just because he's like sitting down sad and crying. Now that can happen too. And you will see some of those, but generally guys will hide it. They will hide it really well and you'll never even know unless you get really close to them and they want to share it with you. And you got to be somebody really special for them to share it with you at that level. Otherwise, you just won't necessarily know. So that's kind of, I'll start with that piece, but I'm pretty sure there's other things too that, I'm really interested in hearing what the other panel members are going to say as well.
Cool. So Mr. Burden or Jamal, you guys can weigh in on that as well.
I would say another way as well. I mean, things that I've noticed is just I said it earlier, just going to a mode of just not shyness, but quietness, just really shutting down, I would say. And another thing is maybe, eating, use that as a habit to, deal with they're just constantly eating, the list goes on, trying to deal with the depression. And I think that's all I should say right now for those two things. But definitely, I noticed the eating and just the definitely being quiet, just really just shutting down.
Cool. Thank you.
From my experience, just kind of seeing, and like Dr. Williams said, is you see a lot of it in behavior. I've seen boys sexually abused and but I know it and they would never tell me. Never tell me. And I don't care. I've been with them 3-4 years, and the behavior, their aggressive behavior, it becomes aggressiveness. The aggressiveness just continue to escalate and escalate. And like Dr. Williams said, next thing you know, once they get evaluated, they're in a system. And now when you're in the system, the aggression doesn't just tailor or taper down. It just continues to escalate and escalate. And that sense of power and control, it just becomes a sense of, I got to control this situation. I have to be powerful. Because when you think about, especially men aren't, I hate to say this, generalize it, but typically men aren't always the best communicator, and when it comes to communication, you have to communicate what you feel. And when you're talking about communicating what you feel, we don't always do that. I mean, I didn't do that always. I'm a lot better and I'm a work in progress. But the thing was, when it came to letting someone know how I feel, you had to know what I call emotional intelligence. You got to know what different emotions mean, instead of mad, sad, happy. Those are typically ones the primary ones. But then it gets to a point where, what it means to be bored, what it means to be ashamed, what it means to be disappointed. What does it mean to be, because a lot of times guys say, I was mad. But what were you before you got mad? I was disappointed, which pushed me to the edge of being mad and angry. And so that sense of aggressive behavior is something, because like Dr. Williams says, men, but especially boys, they are very good at hiding. Which means if you hide it, it means that you're going to usually be misdiagnosed. And when you start becoming misdiagnosed, now these boys are on medication that they may not even need to be on. Mm-hmm. And now they're receiving treatment that they don't even really need to be receiving, because if I'd known that this is what you was going through, then I would have did it this way. But because you hit it so well, now you are being treated for this. I've seen plenty of young boys, 5, 6, 7, 8, ADHD. But would you be able to sit down if you've been through some of the things that they've been through? Would you be able to concentrate and sit down in school if you've never really been in a structured environment? And so it's one of those things of their experiences, which kind of goes back to linking to a cultural competent clinician, someone that understands your story, to say that because I know this is what you've been exposed to, now I understand it. I know that you're trying to hide this, because when you say this, or when I see this, I know this is what it really means. And so because I understand that, I can provide you the right clinical diagnosis versus just guessing based off of something that came on a piece of paper. And when you come in, you don't have nothing to say to me, and you being defiant. And then next thing you know, your oppositional defiant, so it just becomes a long list of misdiagnosis. So I guess that depressive state is a lot of hidden feelings and a lot of hidden emotions, to the point where, they can't articulate it always. But the only thing I can see is someone just sitting here mad. And like Pastor Brody said, is that the simple fact of sometimes the introverted person. I had a kid that was 19 that was in school. He didn't want to be in school. He hated school. He was in a university. The only reason he went is because his mama wanted him to go. But when he got there, he played YouTube all day, every day, he didn't go to class. And he got to the point where he reached out for therapy, in which I end up helping him to realize, go talk to your mama about this, because if this is where you don't want to be, then have a communication. Communicate instead of sitting there for a year and a half in a university that you don't want to be in. Go talk to your mom about this. Yes, she may be mad, she may be disappointed, but this is your life. And this is your time to become a man, to make sure that you express the needs that he did it. He went back home. His mother accepted. He got a job and he's feeling a lot better. But the thing was to communicate your needs in that. And he went the route of the introverted, of just being depressed, not saying anything. I'm gonna sit here and play YouTube. I'm gonna play video games all day, every day. I mean, that's all he did every day. And I'm like, you don't get tired of doing that? He got tired of it, but he didn't know what to do after he was tired. And so he just sat there and continued to do it. And so it's just one of those things, depending on the personality, can be depending on the display symptom that particular man or child may show.
Yeah. Wow, you guys said some really, really good things. And Kendrick, I have that community mental health background. So I saw it all the time when I was doing community mental health, where our Black and brown boys with ADHD, ODD, that was, and not looking at it either from a trauma-informed lens to see, this is not ADHD or because I have my attention or my concentration issues not related to ADHD, but it's related to trauma. It's related to things I've been exposed to, the things that I've witnessed, and how those things are impacting my ability to concentrate and focus in school, or impulsivity and different things like that. So you guys have just hit it on the head and said in terms of like some of the common ways, like it's the behaviors, externalizing type of behaviors that sometimes we see. Another one I thought about was just the overworking. I think that sometimes we don't think about just, okay, I'm gonna overwork. I'm just gonna focus my attention here, work. So I don't have to think about all the other stuff that I have going on. So, but thank you guys. It was really, really good. So I know for the sake of time, I did want to put this question out there in terms of faith-based communities, the church. So one of the things that research does show us is that African-American men tend to utilize those informal supports. Kendrick talked about it. I'm just going to talk to a friend, right? So they tend to use these informal supports, and those who are involved in church may feel more comfortable initially talking to their leader. Because it was a different study that I think I researched that talks about in terms of like crisis, like the top two people who are going to get called in the time of a crisis is going to be the police and a pastor, if you have one. Like one of those two people are going to get contacted if there's like a crisis going on. So from the standpoint of faith-based communities, how can the church and faith-based communities be instrumental in promoting mental health and wellness of Black men? Pastor Jamal, I'm gonna let you start with that one, and then everybody else can come in and chime in. But how can the church, right, be instrumental in promoting mental health and wellness in Black men?
I think the way the church can get better, to do better with promoting us going to see therapists, is stop trying to be the therapist. If you know that if you know you don't have that background, you don't have those credentials, yes, pastors, you do give spiritual guidance, but things when you see things that is just beyond, we all, it sounds like we all been raised in church, a lot of times we've been taught, well, it's demonic, and it's not demonic. It's just maybe that individuals deal with mental illness. Mm-hmm. And so I think the way the church can just get better at this is to promote, hey, well, okay, if you are this way on Sunday, and then the next day you just, you still, you're like, you on 1,000, on Sunday, but then on Monday you're back to 2, which I know that's a huge difference. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, you need to encourage that individual to go see a mental health expert, and they're not demonic, they're not bad, whatever. It's just things that's beyond their control. And I think that we, as I would say this as a leader, we have to push and say it across the podium or say it on the virtual, however, go see your therapist and support one another and to share our testimonies. I really believe that will help us, and us not trying to, and I don't want to get on my soapbox, not trying to be that therapist. I think the thing about sometimes pastors, I'm not trying to throw anybody out, but sometimes pastors, they just try to be that number one person. Like, oh, if you don't come to me, you're going to go give them your insurance. You're going to give them $35. I can give you this, versus you don't have the credentials or the background. You don't understand the language. You don't understand the content. And so, so I think that's what we need to stay in our lane and say, hey, you know what? I love you so much, but I want you to get more than what I have, and so I just think that's a great way of doing it and sharing our testimony. I mean, every pastor may not have seen a therapist, but like being true and authentic and sharing what it's done for you. I can tell you what it's done for me and my life struggles and how it impacted me. So I really think that's a great way to get it out to the faith-based communities. I really, really do. We got to stop trying to be the therapist, the doctor, trying to be the pastor, trying to be the construction worker, and just be the pastor. And if you have people like yourself and these great experts on this panel, use those people. Send them to them. Yeah, I mean, but that's all I say for right now.
Great, thank you so much, Pastor Brody. That was really good in terms of encouraging individuals to say, hey, like to kind of stay in your lane. Sometimes we may want to be outside of our scope of in terms of what we know. But thank you so much. Kendrick or Dr. Williams, also, I do want to afford you the opportunity to share ways that you think that maybe the church or faith-based organizations can also help promote mental health and wellness in Black men.
Cool. I'll say this and I'll try to be brief with it. One thing I think is just to kind of piggyback on what Jamal was saying is, really viewing mental health experts as part of the bigger interdisciplinary team that God has set for us. And so we got medical professionals, we got the spiritual professionals, we got, mental health professionals. We got people who work on our house. Like, there's a bigger interdisciplinary team that we all work with. And so I think, allowing the congregation to what Jamal was saying, just to promote that. And the second thing I was going to say too is because I've worked with the military for a long time. And one of the things that we do is we have counselors that are kind of embedded in the units. And I think, Patricia, you know what I'm talking about. So as a military and family life counselor. So in that capacity, one of the things that works really well to get other members of other service members to go is when the commanders, the people at the top are saying, hey, you need to go see this counselor, and they promote it. They give their own testimony of what it was like. And so I've seen it happen even in populations where you just know these gentlemen are not, or these females are not necessarily inclined to go see somebody. And so you see it in that capacity. And I think it's a page that even the churches can also steal too. Like, look, if they're sharing their story, like Jamal said, it really does make a difference. And I've seen it happen across many fronts. But when I started in the military, and I'm like, yeah, they are really getting it. Now you're starting to see the stigma in the military begin to go down. A lot more people are adopting, hey, they got more mental health professionals now that are on base. And so I like in the church, you might even see that same transition. So I'm not saying they don't do it now, but I do think it has a huge impact on the more they promote it, the more people are likely to do it. And it does come from the top. It's not going to be, not everybody in the pews is going to be able to kind of convince everybody like the person at the top can convince somebody. So.
Yeah, because the influence that leader has, they can use that influence to help encourage their congregants to seek help. I love that. I love the concept of that multidisciplinary team. Seeing a bigger picture, we're going to collaborate here. Mr. Burden, did you have anything that you also wanted to share in terms of ways that faith-based communities in the church can promote mental health and wellness in Black men?
I just echo what the brothers already said, because that's can't get a better start than that. And then at the same time, it's just I think Pastor Brody kind of talked about the membership in men in church early on, and I was kind of slimmer than what it used to be. And so having that, the ones that you do have in church, I guess to just rewind just a little bit, platforms like this, this is an opportunity to provide people with resources, information, opportunity to just kind of hear something different outside of, this could have been a regular Bible study night for you guys, but you switched it up to say, well, let's offer this as well. Thinking out of the traditional sense, but also this is Mental Health Awareness Month. Let's do this and let's try to let people know as much about mental health, especially men, especially Black men, because I think that because of the death of George Floyd, it opened up the eyes of so many people outside of just the Black race of Black men are treated really differently. I didn't think about this. And when they was able to kind of see that, it kind of gave them a different light. But I think, with the church, that's one of the first places that Black men always go. I mean, if I'm not going to be forced to go to counseling, if I'm stuck and I'm feeling really bad, I'm going to go to church if it's not but one Sunday. I mean, and I feel better, then I'll exit back out. But they usually always go to church at least. And so one of the things is the church having that resource to saying that I know what's out here in the community to send you, because if the church say, well, go out there and find a therapist, that's a lot harder to say, I know this brother right here, go see him. He will be able to hook you up. He'll be able to help you through your situation because you already tapped into the resources that's in your community. Because if you know someone that knows someone, that connection helps. That helps the process of being confused, and it stops the process of giving up to say, oh, brother, come on in. I'll schedule for this particular time and this particular day, and we'll go ahead and get started. So that kind of helps the process. So, the church is kind of knowing the resources in the community to be able to send, people, especially Black men, that need that assistance.
Great. I love it. I love it. So I know we're about to drop off right quick. And I know, Dr. Weaves, if you have to leave, I understand. The one last question I wanted to ask in terms of what are some things, this is going to be maybe a little bit more personal. So what are some things that you guys do, right, to promote your own mental health and wellness that you might be able to share with some other gentlemen who are watching on tonight? So what would be some things, some recommendations for just wellness? We know that mental health is on a continuum, right, from wellness to illness. So what are some things, what are some ways and suggestions or tips that you would recommend for Black men to do to kind of help promote their own mental health and wellness? Maybe some things you do personally or you've done personally, maybe in addition to counseling or outside of counseling. So Dr. Williams, I'm gonna let you go first just in case you have to leave.
Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, I was kind of writing some down real quick.
Okay.
So I would say the biggest thing, well, I can't even say the biggest thing. I do several things.
Okay.
One of them is I learned to say no. Like I got to stop saying yes to everybody's issues. People call me and I'm like, I make a living talking to people. I cannot also be everybody else's counselor who wants to call me too. So people call, just want to talk. I got to be very careful about how I invest my energy. And some people say, look, if I was, it's a joke now. Like if I had one phone call to make and I had to pick somebody to call, it wouldn't be you because you don't answer. I'm like, yeah, I've learned to stop saying yes because people take up all your time. I feel like I'm held hostage. So no, I learned to say no. The other thing is, because I have small kids and I have 2 kids with special needs, I spend a lot of time with them. It gives me a break to unplug from everything else. And, my daughter's actually sitting here next to me now. But sometimes we're sitting here coloring at night. We're like up late, just me and her. And my wife she's like, yo, I need to go to bed. But we were just coloring and like having coloring contests or whatever. So it's just doing things with my kids that help me to unplug from that too. And the other thing is, and it's probably a longer list, but I'll just kind of end with this third one, is I do a lot of comedy. And so I like listening to things that make me laugh. Because I feel like what we do for a living, especially as clinicians, as a man, and I need things to kind of offset that a little bit. And so life can be very serious, trying to be a family man, trying to take care of everything, got to go to work. But sometimes I need that mindless, laughter where I might, listen to something on YouTube, or sometimes you might even catch me listening to some freestyles on YouTube. So it's just a way to get away from everything else, just to kind of reset my thinking. And I get a break from, just the seriousness of life. So I think those are some of the things that I do. I had a list of other things too, but I'll start with those 3 as things that are pretty tangible. They don't cost any money.
Yeah.
You have to do anything, special. It's right there in your own home. It's right there on your phone. So these are some things that I would think are great starters that doesn't really require you doing much with very little effort to do.
I love it. Pastor Jamal.
Those were great things. A couple of things that I do is one thing is I walk in my neighborhood. So I go outside, walk in my neighborhood, take my wife with me sometimes, and we'll walk and we'll talk. And then sometimes I go by myself. And for me, it's just enlightening to hear the birds chirping, and I look up at the clouds, and it's just, just kind of get away from my phone. I may listen to some music, but I try not to. Sometimes I do have my phone, but not looking at my phone as I'm walking, just to free my mind. So I'll do that. And I journal. I do journal. I learned that through therapy. I'm an only child, and so I lost my mom in 2019. And so I learned through therapy how to journal. Sometimes I'm journaling and shedding tears at the same time, about how I feel, how I miss my mom, and just some of the things I would do with my mom. So I would use that as a great tangible way to pretty much best practices I would use for myself. And then I like what he said as well, spend time with my family. In this pandemic, before pandemic, by being bivocational, you work a full job and then you pastor church, and stuff like that. So in this pandemic, I've learned I didn't want to before, but I have two daughters, an 8 and a 12-year-old. So, spending time with my wife and my kids have been so fundamental for me. And that's healthy, keeps me solid, keeps me grounded. Girls are dramatic. Patrice, excuse me, you are, two other girls are dramatic. But however, it helps me to just, it's okay. To learn to say it's okay. And things that I may have been tense about, it's okay. Okay, it's just learn to say it's okay. So those are a couple of, I guess, things that I use for me to help me to move forward. Yeah. Thank
you for sharing, Mr. Burden.
Similar to what the guy said, exercise. I do a lot of exercise. That's my thing. I exercise. It takes my mind off of everything, and I'm just in that moment. It don't matter what kind of exercise. A lot of it is weightlifting, but it don't really matter what it is. If it's competitive, I'm that dude in the neighborhood. If it's a little kid or you want to play, I can be, I'm talking junk. It's one of those things where, I'm just having fun. That's one of the biggest things. I love to play. Like Dr. Williams said, with my daughter or even with my son, I love to play. That's when I was small, I had an easy childhood. Some things were a little rocky, but for the most part, it was a good childhood. So playing was one of the things that I've kind of learned a lot from. YouTube videos and things of that nature, kind of watching funny videos or anything that kind of take my mind off of what I do. I don't watch anything related to therapy, social work. I don't watch it. As soon as I see it, I turn the channel and I'm done. Like that's like something I've done since I started the whole social work period. But then also like Pastor Brody said, being with family. One of the things that I try not to do is I don't isolate myself. When I start to feel a certain way, the worst thing you can do is isolate yourself, because then the devil will start playing with your mind a little bit more. And then you are having those ruminating thoughts and ruminating feelings all over. And so when I catch myself feeling a certain type of way, I automatically contact someone that's generally going to pick me up. Doesn't mean that I have to tell them what's going on. I could just call my grandma and she'll just start talking about everything in the world. I don't have anything. She's just glad that I called. And then next thing you know, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm not in that mood. I'm in a better space. So, calling someone that's going to make you feel a lot better. And you don't always have to share. You don't always have to go deep in the conversation. You can say, I'm just checking on you. How you doing? And then next thing you know, you're already in a better mood and you can move on with it. So just don't isolate yourself. That's one thing that I most definitely don't do, because it's easy to, because naturally you'll want to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Oh my goodness. This has been so good. And I like Dr. Williams said, this can go on and over. I'm thinking about, oh my God, all these other questions I wanted to be able to ask and have you guys speak to. But for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up and conclude for tonight. I do want to just walk around right quick to see if there's any final thoughts, any final comment. If there was, if there's a male watching or is going to catch the replay, if there's anything that you would want to say to him or encourage him, if he's kind of on the fence about seeking therapy or participating in therapy, is there any encouragement or anything that you would want to say to that particular person watching today? And we're going to close out with that, and I'm going to let you guys, have your evening. But are there any final comments in terms of either final comments in general, or either that question in terms of if you would speak to a male who's watching or may catch the replay, what is something that you might want to say to them if they were on the fence about whether or not to participate in therapy or have their mental health be a priority?
Patrice, if it's okay, I can go. I mean, you mind if I go first? If the guy's okay with it. Thank you for allowing me to be on this platform. Thank you to Destiny International Ministry, to Apostle Brown for allowing me to speak on this platform. But what I would encourage, brother, Kendrick said it, to face your fears. Don't be afraid to face your fears. It's okay to reach out to someone and to find the resources to get you a therapist. It will make your life better. And it will set you free with the help of God. And I would say this, to know that, brothers, you're not in it alone. We all have had some traumatic situations. We've all been into some uncomfortable situations that we have not shared our story, but it's okay to share your story. I have a story that one day I will share, and I'm gonna tell it all one day. But to definitely hang in there, don't commit suicide, do not use your level of confusion. Do not do it in a bad way. So don't just go drinking and smoking and stuff like that. It's okay to get you some help. Do it in a healthy way. And this way will make you better, and your family. It will bless not only you, but it will bless everybody that's connected to you. So that's what I would say to the brothers. And to the brothers, I love you guys. I love you. I thank God for the brothers, because we definitely are leaders in this world, and people need to see us being in many capacities. And it's okay to be emotional, and it's okay to be strong. It's okay to let your hair down. It's okay. You're not in it alone. So that's my spiel. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Pastor Jamal. All right.
I'll let the doctor go last. I guess the biggest thing, for me is that when my son was doing martial arts, when he was coming up, they had a slogan. They said, "We anything and everything at any given moment." And that let me know that as men, you still can be masculine and have those qualities. But at the same time, you also have the ability to be sensitive. You also have the ability to be nurturing. Because if you have a daughter and you're stuck on masculinity, then what happens is you're not able to show your children or people that may be looking up to you different ways. And so a lot of times what they say, people observe our behavior more than what they hear us say. And so if that's going to be the truth, and they always see you stuck on, I got to be tough, I can't cry, I got to be able to show my strength at all times, then what happens is, you got another generation following that same trend. And we don't have too many generations following that same trend because it's not getting us in the right place. And we're in a place now, especially with mental health being kind of overgeneralized, and mental health is a little bit cool right now. Yeah. So if it's cool, then let's try it. So instead of feeling isolated, instead of feeling as if you have to stay stuck, because you don't have to stay stuck, there's a better way. There are so many different ways to where you don't have to continue to live the life that you're living, because there are people out here that, one, have experienced it, or two, been through some level of schooling or been able to attain some license to help facilitate you from that point to the next point. And so when you have the ability to be anything and everything at any given moment, if I need to be nurturing, then I'll be nurturing. If I need to be sensitive, I'll be sensitive. When I need to be tough, then I will be tough. If you try to run up over here at the wrong time, then I will show you how to get back. So it's just one of those things of being whatever you have to be. That's a comprehensive man, being able to do it all versus being only one on one sided and being able to just only do one thing. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. I love it. All right, Dr. Williams, last words from you.
Yeah, I'll try to sum it up. Your life matters. And everything that Jamal and Kenya just said is essentially your life matters. One of my favorite Jay-Z albums was 444. And the whole thing he's talking about is just a legacy, And so there's a quote that I use that kind of guides my work, and I'll share that here because I have it memorized. But it says, "The life I touch, for good or ill, will touch another life, and that in turn another, until who knows where the trembling will stop, or in what far place my touch will be felt." And so when you think about your life matters, it doesn't just matter to you, it matters to every person that you come into contact with, directly or indirectly. For every generation that comes behind you, it matters. For every person that touches that generation that comes behind you, it matters. So when you're kind of trying to figure out, why am I, should I even go to therapy? For one, your life matters. And it matters in such a way that there are so many people are going to be affected by what you do if you come in to counseling, and it's going to be a great benefit to you. So the question that you have to think about is, am I just thinking about me if I don't want to go to counseling, or am I thinking about everybody else that comes into contact with me? So that's kind of my part in words, that your life matters, and you got to have the idea that it's much bigger than you. It's about everybody else that's going to be in your lineage, your generations.
Well said, Dr. Williams. As I mentioned before, thank you, everyone. I thank you for taking the time out to share your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience with our listening audience on today, with our church, and with those who we share the broadcast with. I really appreciate your contribution to our mental health series in terms of conversations with the counselor. It's been wonderful. And I just want to say thank you again. And so you guys, I know I'm going to have to do some stuff for the church in terms of the offering, but thank you again. We'll be talking offline. So you guys are more than welcome to go ahead and drop off, or at least mute yourself and turn off your camera. So I hope that everyone has enjoyed our conversations with a counselor series, our kickoff in terms of Black men and mental health. We appreciate you staying along and participating in the discussion on tonight. But before we wrap up, what I would like to do is go ahead, this is our church, our weekly Bible study broadcast. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about our offering. For those of you who want to give, to sow, to pay your tithes, the ways to give are on the screen. You can always go to destinyinternationalministries.org to be able to share that information. To be able to give and find the different ways to give. If you want to be a blessing to our apostle, you can do PayPal, Zelle, or Cash App. Those are the ways that open a screen. I pray that something that was said today was impactful or helpful this evening. Thank you again for joining us. Please join us again on next Thursday as we talk about spilling the tea in trauma. So we're going to be talking about the T word. We're going to be talking about trauma. I definitely look forward to you guys enjoying or engaging in the conversation. Be blessed and have an awesome week. God bless.